listening to the Acoma podcast, where we talk about life, the church, and theology. Now here are your hosts, Mark Halleck, Ben Haley, and Adam Scatula.
All right, everybody. We have a very special episode of the Acoma podcast for you today. We have Mike Morgan, who is a part of the CFC family and is helping us lead. He's leading, honestly, the kickoff of our Tennent School of Theology. So we're going to interview him about that today. Mark, maybe get us going on just how did you even meet
Yeah, totally.
Mike?
First of all, I've probably asked you this before. Do you go by Mike or Michael?
I go by both. So my mom called me Michael growing up. My dad called me Mike.
So you're totally
Either
cool
one's
with
totally
either.
fine. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Confuses
Are
my
we
wife
talking
all
straight
the time.
50-50?
Maybe 60-40 Michael, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think at some point when I didn't know you real well, I was always Michael, very careful. But it's just too long. I like Mike. I prefer M.
Well, yeah. M is really my preference.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are also some guys who it's got to be one way to the point where it sounds weird.
Oh,
like
no.
how if I said we just watched a documentary about Mike Jordan,
I know.
just doesn't even
Dude,
sound
it's so
like the
true.
right guy.
Yeah.
It's a great point. Well, anyway, yeah. Thanks, Adam. This is great. I'm so excited about Mike Morgan being with us today. Yeah, man, Mike has become a great friend of mine over the last several years. When did we meet? What year?
I don't know, man. It's probably been 3-4 years ago. Probably about 4 years.
3 or 4 years ago. And it's so funny. You and I knew a lot of the same people. We'd kind of run in similar circles, but we'd never met. I don't think.
Yeah.
And I just remember, didn't we have coffee together? Wasn't
we
it
did.
at
Yeah.
Solid Grounds?
That's right.
And somehow we got connected and we're talking. I don't even know what was the purpose of the initial meeting.
I think that we were getting together to talk about replanting.
Okay.
And I had a guy that was interested in replanting
That's
at our
right.
church. And so
That's right.
that was the initial connection.
Well, that's how it started. And man, from there, we just realized, man, we have so much in common. Our love for the Lord, the church, theology, church planning, mission. And we left that meeting going, man, why don't we just do this together? Why don't you guys become part of the Calvary Family of Churches? Probably.
Totally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think I just went for it, I think I just went for it. And I don't know. I didn't know if you thought this is a crazy guy. What's he talking about? But I felt real good about it. And anyway, so you guys joined the Calvary family, and man, we've just been doing ministry together the last several years in different ways. Praise the Lord. It's been awesome. And so today what we're talking about is actually, it's so funny. It's a dream. Well, again, you remember some of these details better than me. But you and I were thinking along some of the same lines of starting, what if, right? What if God would use us and our family of churches to start a seminary or school of theology that could help further our mission of making Jesus non-ignorable and making joyful, passionate disciples for his glory? What would it look like if we started something like that? Well, anyway, I just remember there was another meeting where you had been thinking about that and I'd been thinking about that. Remember this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Remind me of that. How did that work? I'm trying to remember.
So I gave you a call and said, hey, Mark, there's been something on my mind I've been wanting to talk to you about. Hey, do you have some time to get together? And you said, yeah, absolutely. Let's do this. There's something I've been wanting to talk with you about as well. And so we put a date on the calendar. We went and grabbed coffee. And I said, hey, have you ever thought or dreamed, this is crazy. So I know it's nuts, right? Yeah. But have you guys ever considered starting a school of theology before? And you said, dude, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about with you.
That's right.
And so it went from there, man.
Dude, it's crazy. And so here we are now. In this last year, we are in process of launching. I mean, we've gone public. This William Tennent School of Theology, which we are so pumped about. So what I want to do today, Mike, is basically just let you share about this with listeners who either don't know anything about it, or those who might be interested, quite frankly, in joining us and being part of this exciting new educational opportunity. So I'm just going to throw it to you. Let's start with, okay, what is this thing? What is William Tennent School of Theology?
Yeah, well, you already said it, Mark. I mean, it's a dream. It's a dream. It's something that we've been dreaming about, been praying about. I started talking to a buddy of mine that was a fellow church planter about how do we raise up and equip and train ministry leaders over a decade ago. And we've been having this conversation for a decade and praying through this and thinking about this. And little did I know that the Calvary Family of Churches had been asking the very same question and been wondering, how do we go about this? Honestly, as we were dreaming and thinking about this and about how to do it, we were really inspired by William Tennent, who was
William Tennent.
Yeah, he was a Presbyterian, Scotch-Irish Presbyterian pastor out in eastern Pennsylvania, right on the border of New Jersey there. In 1727, he has 4 sons, all of whom want to go into the ministry. And there's no options for them to get trained and to get equipped. And so this pastor, built a log cabin, and then in that log cabin, he started training his own sons Greek and Hebrew and theology and the scriptures and so on and so forth. And then pretty soon other guys started showing up and saying, hey, can you train us as well? And then other pastors started looking at what was going on, and other leaders, and they kind of looked down their nose at Tennent, and they looked down their nose at this quote unquote log college. And they started kind of mocking it and calling it the log college because it wasn't Oxford or Harvard and these, it wasn't really respectable in their mind. But in the end, history kind of vindicates Tennent's college because there's this thing that swept through the eastern seaboard of the U.S., a dozen years later, that we now know as the Great Awakening. And a lot of the key leaders in that movement were guys that had been raised up and trained through Tennent's Log College. So we were just so impressed by that and so inspired by that. And just as we were thinking and praying, Lord, would you raise up another generation of ministry leaders that you could use to make Jesus not ignorable here? That was just something that we drew from and were inspired by.
That's awesome. And I think, I don't want to miss this. The end story of the log cabin, or the log college, that became what institution?
Yeah, that eventually became Princeton. Right. So, Princeton Seminary and Princeton University, and actually a whole handful or number of other institutions all grew out of that.
Dude, I love it, man.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about this. I mean, our God is an underdog God. He loves to show off his strength and weakness. And man, we've seen that time and again in our Calvary Family of Churches as we're just a bunch of underdog guys. We're trying to love the Lord, love people. We're passionate about helping dying churches that many people give up on, and planting churches in areas that people try to avoid. And because we believe that God he loves to be glorified and show off his strength and weakness. And I think, man, the Log College vision, that so resonates with me. And I think it so ties in with our vision for Tennent and for what we want to see happen there. Now, let me ask you this next question. Why exactly are we, as the Calvary Family of Churches, why are we starting Tennent? Why are we starting the seminary? Aren't there other seminaries out there? You and I, obviously, we've, and some of our listeners have been educated in different places, but why Tennent specifically? Why do we need this seminary? Why do we feel led to lead this? Yeah,
great question, Mark. There are so many great schools out there, and just praise God for those other schools, those other institutions, and how they've been used, and all the different people that the Lord has equipped and raised up through that. It's been awesome. But one of the reasons, the primary reason why, is because we think that there needs to be a third way to do seminary education. Let me expand on what I mean by that. Traditionally, we have these brick and mortar schools, right? And so people go and they move to campus and they live there for the better part of 3 to 4 years, and they do their studies, and then they go somewhere else. Well, we live in an area in the Mountain West that's 10 times the size of the United Kingdom, where basically you can move to 1 or 2 cities, Denver, Arizona, if you want to get that kind of seminary experience. Otherwise, what we're doing with all of these ministry leaders across the Mountain West is we're siphoning off the best leaders. We're asking them to relocate to our major cities, and the majority of them never return home. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
We don't want to see that happen. And so on the other hand, now more and more, the second option for seminary education, everything's gravitating towards online education. And again, praise God for that. I mean, it's great. It opens up opportunity for people that might not otherwise have opportunity to study. However, we believe that in the incarnation, we have a theological basis or model to see how life transformation is going to happen. It's through life on life ministry. We think that happens in the church, and we also think that that's the best way to teach. We think that there are just some things you can't get in an online class. And so we've been looking at these two models, the brick and mortar model and then the online model, and we've been thinking, well, is there a third way? Is there another way to go about this where people can get relational, life on life, student to student, faculty to student interactions where they're getting real-time instruction, and then also they're able to stay in their ministry context. And how can they do both at the same time? And so that's kind of the why, and that leads into the how of how we operate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam.
Well, yeah. So, Mike, I think one of the interesting things, and I know several people are probably listening, kind of thinking like, okay, ministry education, this is primarily for pastors. This is, maybe I'm not somebody who would ever consider going into something like that. But as we know, there are tons of opportunities with theological education for lay people who are just going to continue on with whatever career they're doing out in the secular world. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the benefits, the why of, why someone who's not planning on going into pastoral ministry might consider being interested in something like Tennent.
Yeah, great questions. First off, Adam, I would just say, I tell a lot of people, seminary is not an absolute necessity, even for people that are going into vocational full-time ministry type positions. What seminary does, I think, when it's working well, is it creates a learning community where other people in community with accountability together are exploring issues, and they're reading through a curated list of books and other things, and they're having to grapple with things that they might not otherwise have either the discipline to, or even the knowledge, like where do I go to find some of this information that they might not have otherwise. And then they get to do it together and grow together, hopefully with a few guides along the way who've maybe walked down that road and can help kind of guide a group of people in their spiritual formation and so on and so forth. And so that, I think, is applicable for anybody, regardless of whether you're in vocational ministry or whether you're a school teacher or a doctor or an attorney or something else. So our God is a great God who's called us to love Him with all of our mind, right? And so we want to think great thoughts of our great King. And I think seminary is a place for us to be able to do that, to exercise. What does it mean to really lean into this? What's it really mean to love God with all of my mind? And so I would say this is the kind of thing, man, it's for anybody that wants to grow, that wants to learn, that wants to do it in community, and would love to do it with a few other people that maybe have walked down some of this, through some of this material before, that could guide you along the way.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome.
So good.
Dude, I'm in.
Tell me.
I want to go back again.
Gosh.
Let's do this.
Well,
take all our friends.
I know this kind of leads us into the how, but I think knowing sort of the model that you're going after, Mike, it's just like, not only would I say people should consider a ministry, a theological, education, but like the unique thing about Tennent is it kind of provides a really realistic way to do it. I think a lot of people maybe have had the thoughts of like, oh yeah, seminary would be cool, but where's the time? Where's the money? Where are all the, how would I ever do that and still work a, 40, 50 hour a week job? But man, that's what I love about this.
Well, and let's let you talk about that. How does Tennent let's talk through some of the distinctives of Tennent.
Yeah.
Because I think this is one of the things that excites me most is how Tennent will actually operate and function.
Yeah.
That's very unique.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're operating on a low residency cohort based model. So what we're asking is people that are part of the program to come out for 2 weeks at a time and either once a year or twice a year, depending on whether they're going half-time or full-time. And we'd like them to come out, and during each of these residencies, they'll come out with a cohort. So it'll be the same group of people, and they'll start together, they'll work through the program together, and then, Lord willing, they'll be able to graduate together. And so you form these bonds, and each of us know, I mean, summer camp or mission trips or anything like that, those are greenhouses for relationship building.
Yeah.
And so we believe if we can pull people together for a couple of weeks at a time, that this is a great opportunity for relationships to take place. You know, pastors they're isolated, especially in these rural communities throughout the Mountain West. They're isolated, they're dying on the vine, they're not connected. And like I said, we don't want to siphon off the best leaders and say, hey, relocate to our city and you might never return back to the community. We don't want to impoverish the communities that we want to enrich, right? Yeah. And so we're saying, hey, come in for a couple of weeks at a time and take your coursework. The second distinctive is not only just this cohort-based model, but we're doing it in a retreat environment. You know, 8 out of 10 pastors feel like they never get a day off. And so we want to help facilitate that and say, hey, you know what, unplug. And we think that academic rigor and rest are not mutually exclusive. That we can pull away and study and then help build into these ministry leaders' lives a rhythm of retreat and then return, back into their ministry field, and then do that repeatedly. And so we want to do this low residency cohort based model of education, like I said, in a retreat type atmosphere. But a third distinctive is that we're inviting them to bring their families along. And now that's not required, but it's encouraged and it's more than welcome. Oftentimes I think that we're not forming people holistically. And so we try and form one aspect of a person, but especially for these ministry leaders that are married, whether they be male or female. So if you're a gal and you want to jump in and bring your husband along, he's more than welcome to come to these residencies, or vice versa. If you're a guy and you're married and you'd like to bring your wife along, she's more than welcome, and your children would be more than welcome. Because we don't want this investment to be something that depletes your family. We want this to be an investment that enriches and builds into your most precious gift that God has given you to steward. And so we want to build into whole families and not just individuals. So like I said, the distinctives are we want to do this in a cohort-based, low residency model.
Okay, that's number one.
Yep. In a retreat environment.
Distinctive number two.
Yep. And we want it to be a family experience. That's distinctive 3. And then fourthly, we really want to emphasize global mission.
I love this, by the way.
Yes,
95% of the seminary-equipped and seminary-trained pastors are serving in the 5% most reached areas of the world. And so the capstone experience, the field education experience at Tennent for theological field education is to go with your cohort overseas to a place in the global south where you will teach in an area of concentration. And so each of our students, as they study, they'll get a degree where they'll concentrate in either Old Testament, New Testament, applied theology, or historical theology. And so our goal is that you will then get to, at the end of the program, go overseas with your cohort and help teach people who don't have that same access to theological education in the area that you've been really taking a deep dive in the past however many years.
Man, that's
so
awesome.
I mean, yeah, and just immediately puts like where my mind goes with that is, I think sometimes we can get sucked into just thinking education is just all a heady experience and we're just filling head knowledge. But man, what a practical way to then pour out immediately through the program into what God is doing around the world.
Absolutely, man. I think theological education is a gift to steward, and it's never for us. It's meant to bless those beyond us. And so what we're trying to do is not just a class or a number of classes, but we want it to be a program, an integrated program, where people are being introduced to these theological disciplines, the great texts of Scripture, and then being encouraged. Not only should this information like stir our souls to worship, theology ought to lead to doxology, but it also should work itself out so that we're on mission in the world.
I love it. It's funny. Mike, you and I have visited a little bit about this, but in light of those 4 distinctives, and maybe you could just speak to this a little bit, it's interesting how in light of COVID-19 and just where we are in this pandemic, there's a lot of conversation right now and discussion about just higher education in general, but also specifically theological education. And I think Tennent is uniquely positioned to be able to honestly, I think, thrive in this type of strange new world. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. Just again, discussions, because you're in this more than I am in terms of, I know Southern Seminary, for instance, had to let go of 30% of their faculty or something like that. Is that right? Is that right, Ben?
I think staff.
Staff. Okay. Anyway, maybe you could just speak to that a little bit. And just again, how Tennent, I think, is uniquely designed to kind of thrive in uncertain times.
Yeah, that's just the Lord's kindness, I think. Jesus is so good, and He's been so good to us through this whole experience. And with COVID-19, everything really is up in the air. I've read a number of studies that are anticipating, upwards of maybe 20% of enrollment, dropping at different institutions. So they're being 20% less in terms of numbers of students at a lot of these institutions. But like you said, Mark, I feel like as a startup, we're nimble and we're uniquely positioned to be able to respond. I was reading an article on Inside Higher Ed about 15 different fall scenarios about how different institutions are going to kind of tackle the fall semester with COVID-19. And there's so much in the air. We don't have all the answers, and we don't know exactly how everything's going to play out. However, I was so encouraged by looking at our model and what we're doing with this low residency type model in the way that we're doing it. We're already incorporating some of the best practices of what many of these other institutions are hoping to do as they're considering perhaps a late start. Well, our Lord willing, our first cohort will be in the fall, already late October. So that late start thing, we've already got checked off. They're talking about doing something in a more modular type format. Well, our whole program is based around that, an intensive where we're only going to be there for a couple of weeks out of the semester. There's a number of things like that. And so I feel like, again, the Lord's just been incredibly kind and has positioned us so that hopefully we'll be able to navigate these waters that are really unknown to all of us as we try and move forward here. So,
that's great.
Man, be praying for us as we continue to plan.
That's great. Hey, a couple more questions here. One, why don't you just talk a little bit about some of the faculty? I mean, you are putting together a great team of some professors from around the world, literally. Maybe you could just talk about that and what excites you about that a little bit. Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, be praying in light of the COVID-19 thing. We need to fly some of these guys in from out of country. Yeah. And so, so we're just praying that we can get them into the country. But we've got a guy over at Durham University, and he's working on a PhD in Old Testament, looking at Proverbs, and particularly Proverbs 30 and the Christological interpretation of that chapter. And this guy's brilliant. He's studied over at Regent College and Reformed Theological Seminary, and up in Toronto, and now he's at Durham working on his I think it's his fourth
graduate degree. The guy's he's a genius, but he loves Jesus and
isn't he a missionary? He's been a missionary. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, worked with Training Leaders International. He's taught all over the world, equipping pastors in the global South with theological education. Our New Testament guy, similar. Man, he's been all over, and he's just finishing up PhD work in Toronto, University of Toronto. Went to Southern to do an MDiv. Has another master's from another university, and is just a brilliant guy. Going to be teaching over at Samford in the fall as well, and so really thankful for both of those guys. And then we have a number of really great applied guys, including
adjunct guys,
including this guy on the couch here, right beside me.
I'm the lone rung here. Let's be honest.
Yeah, so we've got Mark. And another guy up in Wisconsin who's been pastoring up there, and he's been in different pastoral ministries for the last 20 years.
Yeah,
just a ton of experience, and another guy from the East Coast that'll be coming in. So we're just really blessed, man, with our team.
Oh, it's incredible.
Can I just say one thing that intrigued me as you were kind of explaining it all to me, Mike, was kind of just leaning into, maybe listeners are grasping a little bit, but these tracks, like there are multiple tracks that you can take that include, more applied stuff, or more, leaning into the Old Testament, leaning into the New Testament, leaning into different positions. So I guess thinking with both vocational ministry brain and sort of layperson brain, I just think there are so many multiple tracks that this would be so useful to just an abundance of people. I mean, even if you've been in ministry for a long span of time and have, a seminary degree, I think there are so many things that you could get out of Tennent that maybe are more on the applied side that maybe you haven't been able to consider, and vice versa with, more of a layperson. Maybe somebody's just been really interested in, I just wish I had somebody to lead me through learning more about the Old Testament. I'm so interested. I feel like I can grow a lot there. If only there were a way. Well, here's your way.
Yeah. Great point, man. Yeah, we've got these different tracks, like you said. And so if there's anybody who's listening who's interested, so we've been approved by the Colorado Commission on Higher Learning to be able to confer master's degrees, a Master of Letters, an MLit, which is kind of a historic degree typically offered in British universities. And that's unusual. It's not the MDiv that most people get, but we wanted people to know in advance that you're going to have a different experience at Tennent. Also, the MLit degree, it's a really well-respected and historic degree. Yeah. And it also emphasizes kind of what we want, which is people to have a mastery of the written word, or even more, we want them to be mastered by the written word.
Yeah.
And also have a good grasp on these historic texts in our Christian tradition. And so along with that MLit degree, we're offering, concentrations in Old Testament, New Testament, applied theology, and historical theology. And so depending on which track you would go on, you'll either take a deeper dive into the languages, or you'll work on a thesis between these residencies where you're writing, and it builds over the course of the program. And Lord willing, at the end, then you come out with basically a small book that you've written on a topic of interest along one of those tracks that we're describing.
I love it. Well, listen, as we wrap up here, Mike, this has been incredible. It really has been so good. Here's what I want to close with. So for our listeners, how might someone, first of all, get more information about Tennent, and how might one either sign up, or again, maybe talk with somebody about maybe to explore further the potential of studying at Tennent? Maybe you could talk about that just as we close.
Absolutely. Yeah. The easiest way is just to hop online, get on our website. So it's williamtennent.org.
Okay. Spell it out. Just for those of us who are, a little slower.
Yep. William, William, Tennent. This is where everybody gets tripped up. TENNENT.org.
Yes.
Now,
thank you.
If that's hard, just type in www.log.college. That'll get you there.
Same place.
Log.college. It'll get you there. So if you get on our website, there's going to be a lot of information. You can read about what we're doing. Also, there's an apply now section. If you want to apply, you can do that online. And then if you have questions, if you want to talk to somebody, we have a contact us form. So just get on our website, fill out the contact us, shoot it over, and then somebody will get back to you right away. We'd love to connect with you. And if you're local, get together and field any questions you may have, and even if you're not local, we'll set up a Zoom call and field any questions that you might have about what we're doing.
Well, I'll tell you what, as we close, that's so good. Here's one thing I will say to encourage you, man. If you want to study with a guy who's the real deal, who loves Jesus and loves the Word, incredibly sharp, great shepherd, Mike is your man. And I mean that. Of all the guys I know, man, there are a few men I respect more, and a few guys that personally I would be more excited about leading this than you. And I mean that. And so, guys, let us know. You've got some contact information. Pray about it. Pray for the seminary. Pray for our professors. Pray for God to move in power. Again, ultimately, that we would make disciples who are joyful and passionate about God, and that Jesus would be made famous throughout the earth. So, Adam,
Amen.
Mike, thanks, guys. Love you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Acoma podcast, and we'd love to hear from you. Do you have a topic idea, question, or comment? Email us at podcast@thecalvary.org.